Alex. And last but not least, Andy Solberg from Jacobs, who has an expertise in net zero design. I'll give you the 5-minute and the 2-minute warning. Sorry, you're a little crunched.
Yeah, I don't want that from lunch. Yeah, hi. My name is Andy Solberg. I run the facilities and analytics group at Jacobs, and we really focus on quantifying the business case around what all these case studies we've been talking about. And so today I want to talk about, I guess we're working on it, is a really one particular solution, and then enablers of how to get that solution financially in place. So the solution that that we're going to talk about today is resilient power, and it's solar plus storage. Okay, so this is a pretty punchy slide deck, so I think we can move through it pretty quick. So what is solar plus storage? Well, ultimately it's some sort of renewable energy source, usually solar PV, plus an energy storage component that ultimately ends up with a resilient power solution that would be able to support power 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. These systems aren't necessarily imagined to be by themselves. They are grid connected, and they do still have backup diesel gen sets. The key to these systems is right sizing the PV system and the energy storage system. You can't just, the costs get out of control if your energy storage system gets much larger than your PV system. But if you properly couple them by doing an analysis of the PV array, of what it can produce in its given climate and configuration, and match it with the load, you could then come with an optimum solution. And that optimum solution ends up being 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality. And reduce water use. And water use is something that a lot of people don't necessarily associate with power, but like 2 liters, takes 2 liters of water for every kilowatt hour of power that we use. And that's generally tied to thermoelectric power generation, the cooling tower, or if it's even hydro, evaporation off of hydro is immense. It's actually more than thermoelectric. So what are the essential components? On the left here are any renewable resources, which is really solar in all its varieties, rooftop, parking, an on-site field, maybe wind if you're in a good wind resource area, and then an energy storage component. So it could be lithium-ion battery, a flow battery. There's emerging technologies now, compressed air, at utility scale. So all those are pretty exciting developments that will ultimately end up allowing us to get more decoupled from the grid and less carbon impact. The critical loads that are supported, and this is where the resiliency piece really comes into play. If you're looking at an individual building, you can make that building systems resilient. So maybe the ventilation fans, the lighting, heat, and cooling if you're in a climate that's a challenge, so hot in the Caribbean, and up here, it's middle winter, you're going to have to provide heat. Or if you're looking at a regional picture, it's going to be shelter, hospitals, telecom, water treatment. Some of these things, Puerto Rico is an excellent example, is like the event itself, the hurricane event. It was traumatic, and a lot of people struggled to make it through a couple of days. But it was a period of time afterwards where there was no water, no way to reach loved ones to tell you, if they're okay. Those were the infrastructure that really failed. And this type of system would actually support that. So we're hitting on, it's a little bit redundant here, but it's resilient because the solar plus storage ends up being uninterrupted power regardless of the loss of grid power. It could be more affordable if it's properly sized, because it actually, by having storage coupled with your renewable energy source, you could actually reduce your peak load. And peak load, if anyone's looked at utility bills, that peak load is actually a key driver in your energy, overall all-in energy rate. So by being able to shift and match and reduce peak, you're not only saving money for the facility, but you're also doing the utility a favor. They don't have to keep standby generation humming to support that. And then utility deferment too. Sometimes these projects pay off by themselves because you don't have to add that last several miles of transmission line. You're actually deferring that load. We did analysis on Puerto Rico as a case study, and we looked at the levelized energy cost of this system using this Build Back Better requirements that were pretty well imagined by a couple entities, which is 4 to 6 hours of renewable energy storage and then grid autonomy during hurricane, which means we're looking at the solar during that hurricane season. And it turns out that it's really on parity with what the current grid costs were. And that cost is a little bit low because it's on the lower storage side. If you add more and more storage, that cost gets higher and higher. Really, and we're talking about two different systems, a centralized power system, which is what we all live in, and a decentralized power system where distributed energy is what a lot of people, is the buzzword now. But the key there for eco-districts is that the decentralized or distributed power model, you end up being self-reliant, but you're also supporting your community. And I think that's actually a growing thing, is like the net zero story. It's about reliance on one building, but it's getting bigger than that now. It's like, how do you have a region be self-reliant or net zero? You might have a solar plant that's nearby, and it's not necessarily tied to your building, but nearby, and it's actually making that whole community more resilient. Probably got 2 minutes, huh? My controller's dying. So the next slide is really around the hurdle. I mean, this all sounds great, right? But and it's oftentimes how do you realize it? So it often comes down to finance, to finding money to do this. And the EcoDistrict Protocol is actually kind of a good way to think about things, because what we're talking about here is really the idea formation, crystallization. Now we need to move into validating the business case, which is what my team does often, is trying to figure out, okay, what is the monetary value of the system? What does it cost? CapEx, OpEx? How does it all boil down to total cost of ownership? And so I'm going to skip right to the... You have to forward it for me. Anyway, I really don't even need the slides. Here's this is formation, road mapping, and performance. So what we just talked about was formation. The road mapping now is developing the business case, and what we find is really a critical next step. It has to occur, it has to bring stakeholders in that all align with the value of the particular, whatever the idea is. In this case, it's an energy idea. And then we move into procurement process. And the traditional procurement is oftentimes where things get stuck, because these systems, like Chris was talking about, and others, and there's just an inability to have that large capital outlay at the beginning. So you end up having to move to some sort of alternative procurement. And I've actually been involved with a project that's come up several times, the National Western Center. And what we've gone there is we were involved in some of that conceptual design process, some of the slides you showed, Sarah showed. And now they brought on a campus energy partner, which is their active procurement, so there's still details that can't be fleshed out. But really the campus energy partner is they're creating this project company, this special purpose vehicle, and they're linking in an equity partner, debt, and then they have all the different pieces that enable EPC. So by bringing all those together and having a business case that they could all kind of work off on the start, then that team could get off the ground very quickly, which is what's happening there. And really, this ties into just some energy savings. The key elements of that there's a repeating theme here over all of our talks right now. And there's this district energy is one that uses geothermal, and that's what's going on here. It's an ambient loop. Sometimes CHP is at play, sometimes PV is at play, but it's that interconnection, shared energy amongst multiple users. Yeah, I could really go deep on this, but ultimately, I mean, the savings here that have been articulated by there's a big capital outlay, but there's a big savings out to be realized. And oftentimes that savings is not realized because of the funding. And so in this case, what I just described, which this is what ultimately ended up was the project structure for this evolving program, the National Western Center. It was enabled by front-end services, and now it's being wrapped by a special purpose company that consists of all the different parties. And that's it.